The Irish poet William Butler Yeats, in one of his most famous poems, The Stolen Child, described a piece of folklore from rural Ireland in which children are taken away and lured away from their families by the fairies and into the fairy world. If you saw my recent video on fairies, aliens and demons, you would know that I'm very interested in this topic as it appears to continue as an evolving archetype. I would include a latter-day phenomena such as the Men in Black sightings along with this. One of the more frightening and disturbing manifestations of this modern invocation of fairies and human interaction with fairy folk started in Ireland in the late 1980s and reached its peak in 2008, and it was known as bogus social worker visits. These occurrences were reported all over Ireland, the UK, and more interestingly, in Nova Scotia in Canada. Within these cases, a knock would have come on the door, and generally a woman at home on her own would be approached by one or two more of these bogus social workers. They would describe their mannerisms as strange, their behaviour and speech as measured and catonic, and they would always ask the same questions. In one case, one woman in Southsea in Hampshire in England had a son who was crying and wouldn't go to sleep. She said it was around 7 o'clock in a summer's evening. She heard a really loud knock on the door. According to the woman, she said, "I opened it and there was a man there who said he was from social services and there was something wrong with my son because he was crying. He said if he showed me an ID would I let him in so he could check on the baby. Then I saw a woman looking at me. I tried to argue and eventually told him he had to leave. I was so frightened that the police were going to come around and take my son away. I was crying my eyes out. I called the police and an officer came round within an hour. He said he believed that they were opportunist burglars who may have been watching my house. The woman was so shaken up that she didn't go out for a few days, having been so traumatized not only by this disturbing event but also by the behaviour and mannerisms of the individuals described in these photos you can see of their police identikits on this video. These bogus social workers are described as being in their late 40s or early 50s and around 5'10" tall. The male generally has short grey hair, wears dark trousers and a striped shirt. The woman who often accompanies him is generally well built, about 5.5 feet tall. She has short brown hair and generally wears a bright top, although they do vary from region to region. The phenomena has been around so long, and what makes it especially interesting is how it affects the people who've been visited by these bogus social workers. At one stage in the UK, there were 23 separate police forces who took part in something called Operation Childcare. Thousands of man-hours were spent by authorities, both within official social services and the police, to try and track down these bogus social workers. None was ever found. The police concluded that they were dealing with a social panic along the lines of the infamous satanic panic, but they did admit that many of the cases that they investigated were disturbing and significant. The visit by these bogus social workers is so sinister that one story by a woman called Erica Grange, who lived in Northumberland in the north of England with her partner and their 3 children, gave the following description. One day in September 2003, she was at home looking after her baby when a knock came on the door. She described a very smartly dressed tall man and a plumpish woman. They said they had come from the social services department, and Erica Grange began to tremble, concerned about what the reason for their appearance was. They then said that they had a report that she had been abusing her children and they needed to come in and look around. She said no, because her partner wasn't in, and she then asked them to show them their ID. As with all these cases, they produced simple basic looking cards, Social Services Department. There's never any name and there's never any signature. Noticing that the cards were clearly not legitimate, Miss Grange was extremely worried. More interestingly, they were fully aware that she had a little boy and asked if their 2 daughters are at school. She had no idea how they knew this. She felt like she was being spied on, and they had took notes and understood her family and movements of both her partner and her children. Miss Grange then said if they wanted to come in, they would have to produce a warrant and to come with a police escort. She described the man as being in his late 30s or early 40s, about 6 foot, with short dark hair and wearing a dark grey suit. The woman was in her 40s, about 5 foot, with mousy hair and wearing a dark navy shirt. When the couple left, Miss Grange phoned the real social services and was told that the department had no record of her family or any case had been opened. She then called the school where her 2 daughters were attending and explained, if anyone does try to take my children out of school, please don't let them. These visits have occurred all over the UK and Ireland, and also, as I'd mentioned, Nova Scotia. What makes this interesting is that both Ireland, UK and Nova Scotia are places where fairy folklore and stories of fairy abductions, changelings and similar mythological stories exist. Once again, are we dealing with a modern version of the fairy phenomena, similar to the Men in Black and also perhaps connected to the black-eyed children who often knock on people's doors and act strangely as well, trying to come in.